In this video, we're going to discuss two of the solvency ratios. Now remember, the term solvency simply means the ability of the farm business to use its assets to pay off all of its debts, whereas liquidity was a measure of short-term assets and short-term liabilities. Solvency is a measure of overall assets and overall debt or liabilities. Two of the solvency ratios are very related to each other. One called the debt to asset ratio and one called equity to asset ratio. You need to remember the basic accounting equation where it says assets are equal to liabilities plus net worth. And net worth is the same thing as equity. Those two words mean the same thing. The debt to asset ratio and the equity to asset ratio simply looks at what percent of assets are debt and what percent of assets are equity. Now, of course, those two ratios have got to add to 1 because assets is equal to liabilities plus equity. So in order to solve this, we simply need to go find the total asset value, total liabilities, and total net worth. So let's do that for this particular year. The debt to asset ratio, debt to asset ratio is equal to total liabilities divided by total assets. All right, so we'll go right here where it says debt to asset ratio. That's equal to, we'll take total farm liabilities and divide those by total farm assets. All right, so we find that 47% of the farm's assets is actually debt or liabilities. In other words, 47% of the assets has some form of debt against those assets. Now you know immediately that this equity to asset ratio needs to be 0.53 if you're doing things correctly, because the debt and the equity have to add to assets. But we'll go ahead and do the arithmetic. The equity to assets is equal to net worth, which is equity, divided by total assets. All right, so we'll go right here. We'll type equals, and we'll go to net worth, and we'll divide that by total asset value, and we hit enter. There's the 0.53. So these two ratios, debt to asset ratio, equity to asset ratio, are both measures of solvency. The debt to asset ratio simply indicates what proportion of total assets is debt, and the equity to asset ratio simply indicates what proportion of total assets is net worth. Of course, any farm business that is not borrowing additional money should find that the debt to asset ratio falls over time and the equity to asset ratio increases. Of course, any large term debt, like a large machinery debt or a large land loan, would simply cause that, most likely cause that debt to asset ratio to increase and the equity asset to decrease. These are two of the solvency ratios. We will cover the other two in a separate video file, the net capital ratio and the debt to equity ratio.